technical education course, and we want to make sure that that increases by 2 percentage points annually. We did show an increase from last spring, but it was by 0.4%, so we did not meet our goal. So we are at 62.4, and we actually need to be at 67%. That means we have quite a bit of increase that will need to be made this next year. And when you look at the data for students with disabilities, for completing a CTE course, they increased just from the fall to the spring by almost 11 percentage points, and their rate is higher than the district as a whole. And when we look at the Achieve 180 office percentage of students completing a CTE course, you can see they increased by 8.3 percentage points from last spring. So quite a bit of an increase, more than the district did. We also saw an increase at our Tier 3 campuses and the high schools that report to their own area office. So then in moving to Goal Progress Measure 2.2, this is looking at the 18, 19, 10th through 12th graders who are completing an advanced placement course or an international baccalaureate course. And again, we want to increase that by 1 percentage point. That would have meant we needed to be at 41.1. We actually were at 38.4. So we showed an increase of 0.7 percentage points, but not to the rate where we needed to be to meet our goal. And when you look at special education students, they're hovering right around 6% of students who are completing AP or IB courses. And for the Achieve 180 offices, there was a slight decrease for both the office and the Tier 3 campuses. But there was an increase for the high schools, the 2 high schools that are in their feeder patterns reporting to their area superintendents. And then when we looked at Goal Progress Measure 2.3, this is again the 2018-19 10th through 12th graders who are completing a dual credit or dual enrollment course. We wanted to make sure that that increased by 1 percentage point annually up to 13%. We did show more than a 1 percentage point increase, but because we had decreased in the spring of 2018, we did not meet our goal for the spring of 2019, but we're getting closer to it. So we are at 10.5%. That means by the spring of 2020, we need to increase by 1.5 points in order to be back on track to where we needed to be by 2020. And for our special education students, they actually increased from the fall to the spring in the percent of students that were completing a dual credit course up to 2%. And for the Achieve 180 office campuses, you can see as a whole, they increased from 3% up to almost 6%, if you round it up to the spring of 2019, of students who are completing dual credit courses. And then for the Tier 3 campuses, they increased from 3.9 in spring of 2018 all the way up to 10% of their students who are completing dual credit courses for the spring of 2019. And we saw a similar increase for those who are in their feeder pattern. So therefore, overall, our wrap-up for Goal 2 for the 18-19 school year is that we met Goal 2 target of 55 with a score of 60, so we exceeded that. Even though for the Goal Progress measures for the 2018-19 students, we did not meet any of those Goal Progress measures, we still showed an increase for each one of those. We increased by 0.4 for the CTE completion, by 0.7 for the AP, and by 1.1% for the dual credit, though they did not meet goal. So therefore, we still met Goal 2 because we met the Goal 2 indicator. And with that, that concludes our Goal 2 report. There's much more detail in the full report that you all received. And then you all should also be receiving by tomorrow the complete 18-19 Goal Progress Report that has all the goals, all the constraints, all the superintendent responses for everything that was provided to you in the 18-19 school year. It will also be posted on the public website.
Thank you. Trustee
Dr. Lira.
Thank you, Madam President and Madam Superintendent and Mrs. Stevens. Always a pleasure to see you here.
Thank you.
A couple of just quick questions. Just refresh my memory and for everyone in the public, what are our college readiness standards? How do you meet that?
Yep. So there are college readiness and career readiness standards. The college readiness standards are students who meet the Texas Success Initiative criteria in both reading and math. And you can meet that by meeting a qualifying score on either the SAT, the ACT, or the Texas Success Initiative assessment, or completing a college prep course. So there's 4 ways that you can get that
And a college
Texas
prep
Success.
course is an AP course.
No, it is a specific House Bill 5 college prep course that was created to make sure that if students had not passed the Texas Success Initiative assessment, if they took this course, they could get credit. So there's 4 ways that students can make it in reading and in math, and they have to meet one of those in reading and math. So they could make reading on the SAT, and they could make math on the college prep course. So that's one of the criteria. The other one is actually to make the criterion score on an AP or an IB exam. So a 3 or higher on an AP exam, a 4 or higher on an International Baccalaureate exam. They could also become college ready if they earned at least 3 hours of dual credit in English language arts or math, or 9 dual credit hours in any other content area, like CTE or something else. Those are the college ready indicators. And then the career ready indicators are any student who earned an industry-based certification, earned a level 1 or level 2 certificate, completed an associate's degree, earned credit, at least 3 credit hours from a dual enrollment on-ramps course, or they completed, they were a special education student who graduated with an IEP and a workforce readiness. Or, and like I mentioned before, a new one that they added was if they're special ed and they earned an advanced degree, which would be the Distinguished Achievement, Recommended, Foundation High School Program with Endorsement, or Foundation High School Program Distinguished Level Achievement. And then there are other ones, like for accountability, it also is intent to enlist in the military, but that's not included in your goal.
So in order to meet this standard, there's quite a bit of criteria for high school students in order to reach this standard.
They can
College
meet any
and career,
one of
all
those.
of them. So there could be
any one. Now, if a student meets 4 of them, they still only count once. So we want all students to have the opportunity to meet any one of those college or career ready indicators.
So it just generally speaking, it's no longer just meeting your content subject of algebra, English, math. You have all these other criteria that you know, one out of all of them can
One of any
is
of
one
those.
of the accountability criteria.
Yes.
Good. Now, back on page 23, where it states here that we did not meet the goal for GTE course completion, I would like to ask Mr. Love to come up and to address this question. And Mr. Love, good to see you.
Good evening,
sir. My understanding is that not last year, the previous year, there was 700 and something apprenticeship certifications that were granted to students, but last year was 2,789 completions.
Right.
Phenomenal work, phenomenal, to help our students to increase the demand for the workforce.
Thank you.
That's out there. There's a huge gap out there, but it doesn't seem to match. Could you speak to that?
Definitely. And with it, good evening, Board President Davila, trustees, and Interim Superintendent Dr. Latham. With that, Trustee Lira, first, our main goal is also to ensure that students who are taking courses have quality courses with rigor. I think that's a testament to where you're seeing increased certifications, as we're ensuring that our teachers first off have the professional development and the training to offer the certifications, and that students have the opportunity to sit for those exams, which through our data we're showing that we're increasing. But as far as when it comes to completers, keep in mind that Numerator for completers is every student in the high school. So it's not just students who are in CT courses who complete that course. It's every student across the high school, the number of students across all of our high schools. With that, through advising and other work with our counselors, you saw a dip in the fall because they were trying to ensure that our students were meeting all graduation requirements. So we had some students who were taking out elective CTE courses and placing other courses which were required for them to graduate or were required based on their pathway where they had to take it during that year. Increased advising across the schools, you'll see that, and we had really a huge initiative last year. I'll tell you, the counselors and advisors at the schools are doing tremendous work, in addition to the assistance they're getting from our district support. But with that, that's one of the reasons why we saw a decrease, was we had some students who were just taking out of those CTE courses and placing other courses needed to meet graduation requirements.
But yet at the same time, simultaneously, they were passing the certification exam, but just not completing the course.
Correct. Okay. Some were removed, and also we just, I think, the testament to the teachers. They did amazing work with providing those opportunities for students and aligning what they're learning in courses to meet these certification requirements.
Okay. No, it's phenomenal. I appreciate the number of students receiving certification in our K courses. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Trustee Sung. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Dr. Latham, very much for the presentation. So first of all, congratulations on our progress towards Goal 2. Making sure that our students leave our district ready for what comes next, ready for college and career, is near and dear to my heart. That's why we have, part of why we have this goal. I think the state is starting to pay more attention to this. After we set this goal a couple years ago, now the state's come back around with House Bill 3 and says, hey, everybody needs to start doing this. So I feel like we're leading the way here in Houston, I see. So Dr. Latham, a year ago you gave us your plan for achieving the 3 goals that we then had a year ago. And I'm wondering, what were the strategies that you followed that really helped us to make the progress that we've seen this year with Goal 2?
So our district improvement plan, which will also be presented again to the board November, is the target date for that. I'll list those strategies out, and then I think Mr. Love also hit on that. One of the things also, I don't know if you discussed, Mr. Love, that we also, throughout our principals meeting, we utilized that time during breakout sessions, and then also we brought additional staff in with principals during principal training time to make sure everyone understood the strategies and they had the necessary support on their campuses to implement the strategies.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that support that you're giving our principals, especially since these standards, as we've discussed, keep changing and being updated. And thank you, Ms. Stevens, for going through that standard for us. So, one thing that you called out that changed was students are considered college and career ready if they're identified as receiving special education services and earn an advanced degree plan, right? So that's new. I'd like to better understand that. What's an advanced degree plan?
It would be graduating with the recommended diploma program, the distinguished achievement program, the foundation high school with endorsements, and the foundation high school with distinguished level achievement.
Okay.
As opposed to the minimum or the foundation plan without any endorsements.
Okay.
Those would be the other options that would not be counted.
Great. So then on slide 4, we saw the big jump, right, on our for students with disabilities from 36%. Is that a percent or a score?
That's percent.
Okay.
So it's the percent of special education student graduates, so special education graduates, who are meeting the college and career ready indicators.
Okay.
So now that also includes students who are meeting that, the distinguished recommended those program types.
So I'm wondering how much of this growth is a result of the change in the standard, and how much of, if we were doing an apples to apples, right, what growth would we have seen?
Yeah. We'd have to get back to you on that. It's not something that we didn't recalculate the 2017. So in order to tease that out, we'd have to give that to you as a referral and provide that information later.
So, I think that makes sense to me, right? I'm glad the state is giving credit for that, so that we're encouraging students with disabilities and paying attention to whether they're graduating on recommended rather than just the basic or the foundation plan and the earning endorsements. But I also would like to see our students with disabilities also closing the gaps in other areas. And I started printing but did not finish, actually pulling out the CCMR reports for each high school in the district, because I was interested to see the breakout, right? So you listed all of the different ways that a student could meet that criteria, and I was wondering what was driving this growth, right? So we saw a jump from 52 to 60, right, on the previous slide 3, right, which is great, very commendable. Some of that is driven by a change in the standard, right? Because our students, we have students with disabilities at all campuses, and I was trying to figure out, well, how much of that is that? And it looks like just for the campuses I printed out, it's 3 to 6% of students are, qualifying based on that criterion. But I don't know for the district if it's more or less.
At the district, we actually had 310 students who were special education with the advanced degree.
Okay.
So out of the total of 11,000 graduates,
so that's pretty small.
It's not a large percent for the district. For certain campuses, that could be substantial. For the district, that wasn't our largest increase. The area where we showed the most change was in the students meeting the Texas Success Initiative criteria in both reading and math. We were at 33% for the class of 2017, and we were at 38% for the class of 2018. So for a district, we increased by 5 percentage points, and most of that came with more kids getting the reading, because they had gotten math, but they hadn't actually gotten reading, and they have to have both reading and math. And so we had a larger percent of students making the reading, which then gave them both the reading and the math. And so that's really where we saw most of our increase, as opposed to from this change. The other one is we also got, there was another rule change from the state on the getting a half a credit for students who were in a CTE coherent sequence of courses. They expanded the list of courses that would be included in that, and that also gave us a good increase. We had gone from 51% of our points from that to 57% of our students getting that. So that was a 6 percentage point increase. We only get a half a point for those kids, but that still expanded the number of kids that were able to get that credit.
Great, that makes sense. So thank you for preemptively answering my question, which is kind of what's driving this change, and thank you for having all of that ready. That TSI piece is really tied to our first goal, right? So it doesn't come as a surprise given how linked the state CCR standard is with the reading and the math criteria. That we knew we were turning in strong high school performance in reading, and so that translates into that TSI. There's also another criterion, the graduate with completed IEP and workforce readiness. Could you expand that? Receive a graduation type code of 04, 05, 54, 55. Could you translate that for me, please?
Actually, I can't do much better than about that, other than we did have 175 students meet that criteria.
Okay.
And I would be happy to refer to, don't look over your shoulder, to Dr. Barrett if he would like to explain a little bit more about the special education students who complete that workforce readiness and how they're coded.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're tag team partners.
I will say we've worked closely with Dr. Brett in special education to ensure we had a seamless process during the ARD committees, especially at the high school level. We ask that CTE teachers are involved with that. to assist with as far as planning, as far as career opportunities for students. With that, I know we've developed plans and provided information to our high schools as far as process for that, but also a process of capturing that information. So within the documentation of IEPs, in the R, they're supposed to be documented if they're in either a workforce program or they're in a career prep, like a job, I should say, outside of school, where they're also then meeting all the requirements for graduation on a certain plan, graduation plan. With that, I'll be honest, some of the data quality in the past might have been an issue. So that's where we want to ensure that through those committees, information was transferred from the committees and the information provided to our registrars on our high school campuses to appropriately capture that information within our chancery system. But we've had training around that with our special education division, also with our student records and our registrars across our districts, so they're communicating also on all the requirements needed for our students so we can accurately and appropriately capture that information.
In addition, this is a coding issue, and we've created a one-pager systematic process to help registrars and department chairs understand how students should be coded in order to make sure that it's aligned to what's in the actual IEP as well. A lot of this work centers around collaboration with Mr. Love, as well as ensuring that there's a systematic way of tracking it. The big piece for us is that when we look at our transitional programs, students who are in the 18 plus, who may actually, year one, prepare job employment skills, and then they're potentially hired the following year. As well as there are some campus-based programs that also help students to build employability skills. We're actually excited because 2 of our students were hired this year by HISD based upon their success in our transition programs. They actually work with nutritional services, but we're also looking at building other options and capacity so our students who we prepare during the transitional program can potentially become our employees as well.
Okay, thank you. So if I understood correctly, then what you all are saying is that this is something that we report, right? So based on students' IEP and based upon their career plan that's tied to that IEP, then we may, if we certify that students have met certain criteria and certify that they've met this qualification. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Another part that's clear, which you've already started to do, we now conduct audits to ensure that students are coded correctly before the actual data is submitted. So that was something we went back to ensure that was done, and we've already conducted an audit for Wheatley High School, and we're looking at all of the other campuses that could benefit from increased percentage points because of the coding areas.
Yeah, thank you. So that's something that I noticed. Thank you for bringing up individual campuses. I looked at, there's a breakout of our schools on page 7, right? So I started printing from the bottom up. And I noticed for our schools that are struggling with the standard, right, there's a lot of zeros on the report, right? So there's a lot of places where, let me put it this way, there's a lot of differences, it seems to me, in terms of what campuses seem to be offering, right? So it seems like some schools just don't have a dual credit program where they have the opportunity to earn ELA or math because nobody is earning that. Or they don't, the TSI earn credit for a college prep course, right? There's just a lot of zeros. And I'm wondering what is our approach? I know it's hard to come in as a high school principal. A lot of our principals at high schools are coming in from a middle school or elementary school where they don't have to deal with CCSMR at all. And so how do we, what is our approach to make sure that students have similar opportunities across our school campuses?
And while Dr. Cruz is coming up, I want to make sure that what the data that you're looking at for CCMR is for the graduating class of 2018. So things that we put in place in 2018-19 are going to be captured for the graduating class of 2019, which will impact 2020 accountability. So everything that we're talking about on CCMR and what you're looking at is going to be for the graduating class of 2018, which would be the 17-18 school year, And a lot of the things that I'm sure Dr. Cruz is going to talk about are things that we've already put in place for 18-19 that would not have been captured.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why the weird thing is this goal here, right, is 2018 data, and then our progress measures are more current, actually. Those are progress measures for the coming year, yeah.
Sure. So good evening. In reference to your question, Trustee Sung, we, at the beginning of each school year, we begin by making sure that our team across the different strands, career readiness, college readiness, post-secondary programming, et cetera, are meeting with the campus leadership teams for each campus to look at what are their offerings in terms of post-secondary readiness and making sure there's alignment. And so there's been a push, and to your point right now, this is certainly a lagging indicator, and so it takes us a while to catch up, to respond to the data. But things such as the college prep course that you mentioned, not every campus offers that. Certainly, though, at the beginning of the year when we're sitting down with principals and looking at their schedules, and even prior to the beginning of the year as we're looking towards next year, master schedule build out, we have those conversations because ultimately we want to make sure that it's customized to which each school has and that our kids are meeting college career readiness in one shape or another.
Okay, thank you. Are there, so among all of these many indicators, right, and there's so many, if I don't reference the list, I just can't remember them. I'm sure you can. Are there ones that we feel have the most value for our students, or are there ones that we feel like, it's on the list, but that's really not part of our strategy?
Well, I was really happy to find out, as Dr. Stevens shared a little while ago, that our biggest gain was in TSI readiness, making sure that our students are meeting the criteria, whether it's through SAT, ACT, and so forth, to be college ready. For me, that's perhaps one of the more important ones because that makes sure the student, when they pursue any type of post-secondary education, can go straight into the coursework without having to take those remedial courses. So it's exciting to see that we've made the biggest gains there, but all of them are valuable ultimately.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that you agree. What the state's adopting is valuable. Thank you. And I'll just note something else I saw in the data. A lot of schools, on this list, let me put it this way. So one of the criteria that schools struggled with on this list was the APIB, right? And something that I noticed is that schools that had some sizable number of students passing AP and IB exams, maybe not in the hundreds, but in the dozens, like the 50, like none of those schools were at the bottom of this list. So something I'm noticing in the data is where schools have a strong enough academic program where some number of students, robust number, are earning credit on AP and IB exams, they're not struggling here. So it's just something that I was noticing in the data, which I think makes our goal progress measure focusing on APIB relevant. Okay, thank you. So I'd like to then turn and take a look at some of our goal progress measures here. So as we just discussed, right, the goal is for 2018 data, and then the goal progress measures are more current data. It's 2018, 2019 data. It gives us a picture of where we'll be a year from now when we look at our 2019 graduate data, and then in 2020 as we're putting systems into place. So Dr. Latham, we didn't make our goals for a lot of these progress measures, right? And I'm wondering, what do you think the key reason is for that, and what do you think we need to do? What are we doing this year, implementing this year, so that we can improve on our goal progress measures?
I think it goes back to looking at, number one, the data for individual schools and looking at not only, like we said, we talked about before, their master schedule, but their intervention schedules, their enrichment schedules, ensuring that we have the correct staff members that are teaching those particular courses, especially those courses as it ties back to our goals. And then we still needed to make some changes. One of the things we're doing this year is truly paying attention to those school improvement plans. And we've done it in years past, but what's a little bit different this year, similar to what we've done, bless you, over the past 2 years, is around special education and writing, is the school improvement plan, and monitoring that is now a strand of part of the monthly principal's professional development. So every year as we start thinking about those focus areas and areas of needed growth, and that's one that we are looking at, and we'll monitor that, and there will be activities tied to ensure that everything is tying back to the goals.
Okay, thank you very much. So for 2.1, right, which is our CTE focus, we've gone back and forth a little bit in what we've presented, Ms. Stevens, on CTE, and I don't remember all the changes that we've made over the last few years, but I noticed that on this current state standards, it's specifically CTE coherent sequences that the state's now paying attention to. And that's not what this presents, is that right?
That is correct. This is any student who's taking any CTE course. So again, with it being a leading indicator, trying to make sure that we're actually encouraging students to take a CTE course, then we can move forward with trying to get them to take coherent sequences and then take the industry certification, which then gives them the career ready piece. But as a progress measure, we're starting with just increasing the enrollment and completion of CTE.
Okay. And that makes sense. You have to have CTE classes that students complete in order for them to complete coherent sequences. I'm wondering, would it make sense for us to also look at CTE coherent sequences themselves and students that are taking CTE courses that are part of coherent sequences? Is that data that's hard to report? I think we used to look at that, and I can't remember why we stopped looking at it.
Because we were trying to show a more comprehensive look of the students taking CTE. Yeah. If you want to change your goal progress measure, we would be happy to report something different, or if that needs to be a referral, we can do that as well. But right now, we're providing the data that as it's written in the goal progress measure.
Okay. Well, then I guess it's more of a academics question then. So we're focused here on students completing CTE courses. How well is this leading indicator working? How well is this translating into students actually completing coherent sequences? It's hard for me to tell on these individual high school reports because the CTE coherent sequences, I think they only list them if they did not meet the other criteria. So I'm not actually getting a good read on how well we're doing with that from the reports I was able to find.
Well, and because that's actually the commissioner is wanting that piece to go away.
Yeah.
So it's just being phased in, or actually phased out, as a half a credit of students who don't meet any other criteria. His intention is to actually not have any credit for students who are completing CTE coherent sequences, but only getting credit for students who get the industry certification or a level 1 or a level 2 certificate.
That's good to know. What's the timeline for that phase out then?
So our expectation is, I think it's in 2 years.
The CTE half a credit?
Yeah, the half credit. So it's for the 1920 graduates.
Last year's graduation class was the last class that counted.
18, 19 graduates, yeah. So that means for the 2020 accountability ratings, we wouldn't get the half a credit.
Oh, at all? And it's only the...
Assuming, now the commissioner has not come out with his manual for the 2020 accountability, but that is our expectation.
Okay, thank you. I guess so my question then it's more on the academic side is, what's the value of the coherent sequence, right, inherently to students? And are those actually tied to students earning industry-based certifications?
Well, I will say TA actually just released last week updated lists of coherent sequences. So that's actually going to cause us to meet with all of our high schools, potentially look at altering some of these pathways to ensure that they meet what TA recommends. For instance, cosmetology is not on the list at all. Now, we will have quite a few districts calling TA to say they would like, and they would intend to, they'll send a letter of intent requesting that. But there's other courses and pathways like maritime and aviation. Whereas the Gulf Coast region, those are very important, especially maritime. But when you look across the state of Texas, which TA considers, they don't necessarily look at the job market demand in those industries. That impacts HIC greatly. We're one of the only districts in the state that have both programs. So we will be submitting a letter of intent to have them consider changing that within the next few weeks through our region, Region 4. But through the realignment, as far as what they've forwarded to us, to all districts, we don't know how that might change CCMR. That might mean in 2 years they add that half a point back, since now they've streamlined what they consider coherent sequences across all districts. So it's a waiting game. I know we've been in conversation with TA. on our thoughts and our recommendations. We're also collaborating with industry through Great Eastern Partnership to get their input on what they're seeing as forecasting job growth in this region, because we want to make sure we provide for our students what's relevant here in the Gulf Coast region. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when I look at the schools that are in our bottom quartile on CCMR, very few students are earning industry-based certifications. And is that just because their list is so restrictive?
Well, actually, 2 years ago, well, this past year. Last year was this past graduating class, let me go back, of 18-19 was the last class to graduate on the list of 73 industry-recognized certifications. That list has expanded to 220. There are only 10 of the 16 clusters had a certification tied to it in the past. Now almost all the clusters will have some type of certification. So we had programs out there where students would complete the coherent sequence, but there was nothing as far as an end goal that the state recognized. Now as a district, we offer over 1,000. Right. And we pay for all of them for our schools and our students. But the state doesn't necessarily recognize all of them. For instance, OSHA 10. They don't recognize OSHA 10 yet. That's usually a standard recognized safety credential for a lot of manufacturing, engineering firms, even hospitals. So there's a variation of what the state recognizes and what we offer our students, just to make sure that when they leave HIC, they have something, but it may not be recognized as far as CCMR.
Okay. So where can we expect to be next year for this progress measure?
Definitely an increase. We're hoping through, as far as this one, as far as students completing, if it stays the same, we hope that we're close to our goal of, I think by next year it's going to be, spring 2020, which will be 69%. I will say, the advising and what we're doing at our campuses is working. We're making sure students are taking the correct courses and are in a sequence. So I do expect that to increase. Last year, though, was almost a baseline year, with especially what we're doing as far as having CT advisors go out, work with the counselors, work with other administrators to ensure they looked at the whole 4-year pathway for students and appropriately placed them in the right courses. So.
Okay. So do you have the resources you need from this board to achieve the 69%?
Yes. With that, with our increase in enrollment overall, yep. We do receive additional funding from the state. That helps us when it comes to planning to ensure we have teachers in the classroom. Now, it is hard to recruit teachers, but that's a separate issue. But have the funding to place positions in schools and also even help with expanding counseling in our schools to help ease some of the pressure off some of the administrators. We're trying to look at all the sequences, ensure students are in the right courses, to actually build the capacity within staff at the schools, all of our campuses, to do a lot more of this work, but also provide additional staff within the district, which we've done since Dr. Lathan centralized some of the CT funding last year. We've actually expanded the support to our campuses based on some cost savings that we've identified in certain areas. So I definitely believe we'll get to that 69.
Okay, thank you very much for your efforts and your work, and look forward to the continued conversation. Thank you. Okay, so for goal 2.2, we have APIB, and like I've mentioned, this is really near and dear to my heart because I know that when students are earning qualifying scores for APIB, the research shows that they're much more likely to be successful in college. If we look at our schools where students that have academic programs where sizable numbers of students are earning credit through APIB exams, then the schools also seem to be doing pretty well overall in CCR systems. So I think it's an indicator of how well the school is preparing students overall for life after high school. So here I worry a little bit because we've gone backwards, right? We were at 39% in 2016. In 2017, we dipped a little bit. We're coming back up, right? So I'm wondering, what are we doing? What are we going to be doing differently in the next year with regards to APIB? What's our strategy to get to the 42%?
Good afternoon. So one thing that I want to underscore is that while participation in AP course is one metric that we can look at, and certainly an important one, another metric of success that we look at very closely is success on the advanced placement exams, because by passing that exam is the way that one earns college credit. And we're actually very excited that this past year we saw a 5.5% increase in the number of students earning a qualifying score of 3, 4, and 5 on an AP exam. And additionally, we saw an increase of 4.5% of success, in numbers of exams that received a passing score. So while the enrollment may seem flat, there are hundreds of more students that are earning college credit, which is something that we're very excited about. And in terms of the strategies, there are a number of things that we're implementing as a district, but I would say that all of them are rooted in ensuring that we have an effective, well-trained AP teacher in all of our classrooms. So I've been up here to speak before on a number of the different things that we're doing, but a couple that I do want to underscore would be, one, our partnership with Khan Academy to not only monitor student usage of the tool, but to also train teachers to use this tool to effectively teach AP coursework in their classrooms. And then the other one would be our AP academies. So last year was the first year that we had centralized academies for students to participate in AP exam preparation. This year we're expanding to 4 academies and also including preparation for our IB students as well. And I want to underscore that these are not just opportunities for students to practice college-level coursework examination materials, but it's also a great opportunity to train our teachers as well, because these academies are led by master teachers that facilitate the sessions, and observing those sessions are novice AP teachers that are trying to hone their craft.
Okay, thank you. All of the strategies sound good. Let me get a little bit more pointed, okay? So for the 5 schools that we're at the bottom of our CCMR attainment list, right? If I look at the 2018 APIB Met Criterion score, right, the numbers are 2, 4, 2, 5, and 1, right? So not a lot of students at these 5 high schools are meeting criterion for AP and IB exams. This isn't part of the presentation. I just went and pulled down the raw CCR data, right? So at least what the state is saying, and presumably we agree, we're not appealing, is that, less than 20 students at these 5 high schools are earning scores of 3 or higher on AP exams or the equivalent on IB exams. So, I know that we're working hard. I know that we have these district-wide strategies, but for the schools that struggle the most, right, to develop these programs, like, they need a lot of help. Or what are we very specifically doing for schools where, a lot of these schools have large numbers of Spanish-speaking students, right? So if students were supported to prepare for AP Spanish language exams, right, like they could be earning college credits for their language ability. There's a lot we could do to support these programs. And what specifically are we doing? So I know we have strategies that we're doing across the district, but for the schools that are really, really, really struggling, what are we doing to make sure that there are teachers who are able to help students at those campuses?
Right. Another focus at the heart of our strategies would be to focus on those schools that you're referring to, which primarily are Achieve 180 schools, and that looks a lot of different ways. So one way would be direct teacher support at those campuses. So we have a very small but mighty team that are going out there to ensure that teachers feel supported and are equipped to effectively teach that instruction. And again, the AP Academies are a strategy to target faculty and students at those campuses to go and have that opportunity to succeed. I would need to see the list of the campuses that you're referring to, because one thing that we also notice is that different schools choose to offer different post-secondary programs. Sometimes that is an advanced placement program, but for example, in recent years, we now have 2 new early college high schools, Worthing and Sterling. So in those cases, they may be offering fewer AP courses, and we may see a dip in the numbers. And one thing I also want to point out is that a few years ago, there was only one high school offering what we call dual enrollment through UT Austin, Texas on-ramps, and last year I reported that number was 6, and this year that number's 9. So the ways in which schools are using programs to help students earn college credit is changing every year, and what our role as a district is to ensure that principals are able to make the decision to offer the program that will best equip their students. And we think that a lot of those campuses, even the ones that you're referring to, are on track to offer those programs.
Okay. The number of dual credit students earning credit for dual credit courses is less than 10 at these 5 schools. So, But point taken. And also remember, this is a lagging indicator, so maybe we're doing a lot better for 2019. Okay, thank you very much for your efforts. We appreciate that. I've taken up a lot of time. I want to give my colleagues a chance to ask questions as well. Thank you again for the presentation.
Next, we have Trustee Villaseca, followed by Trustee Dr. Lita.
Thank you, everybody, for the presentation this evening. I just have a couple of questions.
Can you speak up just a little louder? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Hold up the mic.
Yeah, better.
Okay, good. So the first question I have is regarding the Achieve 180 list on page 5 of the version that I'm looking at here in my binder. I just want to know if that's the most up-to-date list and if there are any changes based on the August 15th school year 2018-2019 results.
So that list is actually for the 18-19 school year because the data that we were presenting were for the 18-19 school year. And then I will let the superintendent address the 19-20 list.
And we can actually send you an update out. Actually, I'll put it in the superintendent's update of the list for 1920.
Okay, thank you. All right, another one of the questions that I have is on page 16 of the version that I'm looking at. Hold on, I'm looking at the slide number. So it would be packet page 23. So I noticed that from fall of 2017, looking at the percentage of students completing an AP or IB course for Achieve 180 results, from 2017 fall to fall of 2018, there was a decline of about 5 percentage points. And I know part of the conversations that we've been having regards to access, what are our projections for next year? It looks like we're doing a lot of planning and programming that would lead to an increased result there. But I'm just wondering if we could have a little bit more in-depth conversation on the reason as to why that decline.
I don't have an answer. Can you repeat the question, Ms. Villaseca? We have a hard time hearing the ending.
Yep.
There we go.
Why the decline from fall 2017 to fall 2018 of approximately 5 points?
I don't have an answer.
I'm sorry, Ms. Villaseca. At this point, I don't have an answer as to why we have a decline from 24.8 to 19.9. That is reflecting the data for those campuses of the percent of students that completed an AP or IB course across all of the 10th through 12th graders that were in that campus.
Okay. Are we able to get a list of really the courses that are offered across the campuses, just so that we can look at the access, equity, things of that nature?
Yes, we could provide that upon referral. We can give you a list of all of the AP or IB courses on the. Do you want specifically the Achieve 180 high schools, or are you wanting all high schools?
I mean, if we can filter out the Achieve 180, that's great. And all high schools would be helpful. And if the demographic information could also be included, I think it would just help us look at this again because I'm not seeing the demographic breakdown in this presentation here for any of these data, but that would also help us have a rich conversation when you come back in a couple of months, or maybe in preparation for it, because I think we come back to this topic in a couple of months, if I'm not mistaken, in November, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe then we could look at this from that demographic perspective, talk a little bit more in depth around access, so we're keeping the equity piece in mind.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And then on packet page 43 of the backup information to the presentation, I know that we have, it's the white copies that I have in the binder.
Yes, that would be the superintendent's response to the career ready and the college ready indicators.
Yes. Is the response only to goal 2 or also to goals 2.1, the progress measures, 2.2 and 2.3?
The response was specifically to Goal 2, but also addressed things that the Career Readiness Department and the College Readiness Department had done for 18-19 and planned to do for 19-20. So in a sense, it also is addressing the progress measures as well.
Okay. Also, in the reflect, so I'm reading it, and it talks a little bit about what we're doing to address it. For me, it would be helpful to understand a better understanding as to maybe some of the root causes and the results.
And the root causes for the goal progress measures?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, and that's all I have. Thank you guys, everybody in the audience, and to the staff again for the presentation. It's always very helpful. Obviously, our most important responsibility is to our students and our community, and making sure that we talk about the academic results. And again, just thank you for the detail, for the presentation, to the staff, and for bearing with me as I talk in my mic here.
Thank you, Trustee. Trustee Dr. Lira, followed by Trustee Dygard.
Yes, thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Madam Superintendent. Just briefly, you mentioned earlier about the AP scores percentages going up. I believe taking the course in completion by 5%. Is that correct in the district? My question is that 5% concentrated in certain schools? Because I know there's a school that's just phenomenal with increasing their AP program, and it really carries the bulk of the district AP scores. However, what are we doing for the schools that are not on that scale? So, yeah.
We can provide that information on the campus level. Right on hand, I just have the district level. And of course, that's going to dictate our strategy for how we'll support those campuses that need that extra support so they can also see gains too in AP scores.
I really appreciate this rigorous, robust discussion on student outcome. But in hindsight, in looking at within the last 5 years, 10 years, generally speaking, would you say the AP program are improving, increasing, in the Achieve 180 schools, or is it concentrated in some of our higher performing high schools, that 5% growth?
The growth is across the district, but again, we want to provide you that specific campus level data so we can see school by school. But you can find effective advanced placement programs in any type of school, whether it's one that you may historically think has very strong AP scores and maybe one that you don't. But what's really going to be telling is the campus level data to tell that story.
Is there any particular strategy of the Achieve 180 schools? I know you mentioned preparing teachers, Khan Academy, and all of that, but is there an instructional strategy to increase the AP programs in our Achieve 180 schools? Not only those, but the next tier also.
Right.
I think one thing to point out, Trustee Lira, is that at Achieve 180 and at many of our schools, a lot of the progress has been made and, of course, reflected in a number of different points. It's just building the foundation. And to be frank with you, when we look at things like AP potential, which is a metric, actually a statistical metric that kind of identifies how much potential is there by school, and we know our kids can exceed potential because we see it happen all the time, you'll notice that schools have varying levels of students coming in with different levels.
Right.
And, of course, that is not an excuse for us, because our question is how do we build up to make sure that more kids at high school are prepared. But it would, I think it would be it would be inaccurate for us to believe that all schools have the same baseline potential. And again, I hate to say the word potential because it almost implies something inherent to students, but the students are coming in at the same level.
Right.
And I think if we're serious about moving the needle at all of our campuses to Achieve 180, what we're realizing is that the engagement of the students earlier becomes critical. Students are coming into 9th, 10th grade, not always where they need to be to succeed and thrive in those AP courses, which is why a lot of the foundational work that's been happening, I think, through Achieve 180 will ultimately translate into better outcomes in things like AP and other rigorous courses.
That's a great answer, Dr. Cruz, because that's what I wanted to hear, because those students, perhaps there are gaps in the foundation and the prep for them to be ready for an AP course, and whereas in other areas they are more prepared and they have a stronger foundation. That doesn't mean that they're not capable, but I wanted to hear the strategy as far as the building blocks to get those students prepared for being successful on the AP exam. In other words, we're not going to, if you're swimming in 3 feet, I'm not going to put you in 10 feet of water. So I'm going to get you ready to swim in 10 feet of water. So what is the steps to prepare you for 10 feet of water in order to swim in 10 feet? Because I don't want you to drown. So that's one question. The other question is on the issue of dual credit, which is another college readiness standard. Is the growth due to the expansion of early colleges, or is there also a strategy to improve students taking dual credit courses and with the same similar prep or foundation that is needed to take these courses and be successful?
Sure. So to your first point, actually, you mentioned a little while ago, just earlier, when we look at, just going back to AP for 1 second, when we look at AP growth, I think what gets me really excited is that the largest, if you look at it historically over 5-8 years, the greatest improvement in the number of students scoring at 3 or higher, I think, are with historically underserved populations. I mean, we're seeing our African American, Latino populations. That's where you see the percentage-wise. It's really multiplied over the past few years. So, and that's again a testament to the district's commitment to helping students with access and support, and that wasn't there before. To your point about the building blocks and how do we build capacity and how do we build, I think again it goes back to just some of the work that's already taking place with Achieve 180, already just in terms of literacy and math, and we know how important those are for all the AP subject areas. But even at the middle school, and I think that's why now we're doing more through different initiatives, even thinking about things like Project Explore, which aren't direct academic, but helping the mindset, helping kids start thinking about getting ready for high school and so forth, because we're realizing that students are going into sometimes high school not where they need to be, or at the starting point. So I think it really begins at middle school, and a lot of effort is now being placed into building that foundation at the middle school level. As far as dual credit, we can provide that data as well. In fact, I know Carla produces the reports. You'll see dual credit has increased, not just at our early colleges. Of course, they've contributed. I think last year we had about 500 additional students graduate, not just with dual credit, but with associate's degrees than the prior years, 500 students total, which is most we've ever had. So we've definitely seen an increase in the early colleges, but even at schools that decide to offer dual credit pathways, we're also seeing a number of different types of schools, traditional schools also offer that as well.
Okay. On slide number 7, if we can refer to that. In the second tier, one of the Achieve 180 schools is Sterling, which at the second tier, and they do have a early college component in their campus. Is that correct?
I believe it's in. Is it functioning already?
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That is correct.
Now, I'm just concerned about Yates and Washington. Do they have an early college component because they remain flatlined?
I don't believe so. No. No. And again, early college has a designation with the state. It requires multiple years of planning and documentation that's submitted to the state, but I don't believe, to the best of my knowledge, those schools are not pursuing that at this
To the
point.
best of your knowledge, what do you think is the reason why these campuses are flatlined?
Well, if we think of, I'm sorry?
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
schools offer different things. I mean, if you offer early college, there are restrictions to it. And so if you want to offer APIB and so forth, it would complicate things to be able, especially to smaller schools, to do that.
Which program requires more of a preparation and foundation prep for students, dual credit course or an AP course?
I think I think for us, we're agnostic, to be honest with you. I mean, for us, it's rigor. Are we making sure that our kids are getting the access of rigor that they need to be college ready, so then show up to college, they're not taking remedial coursework, they're not flunking out of their classes?
Well, the basic level is at least be on grade level number 1 to start, right?
I think the distinction between dual credit and AP, and perhaps the advantage of advanced placement in some respects, but I'm not saying it's necessarily better, is that there is an assessment that at the end.
So if you were designing an instructional program to prepare your students to be successful in a dual credit program from middle school to high school, or an AP program, what would your design look like, or your design, Ms. Superintendent? Because this is the building blocks, the prep program.
Can you repeat that? I mean,
If you were to design the building blocks for students to be successful, and perhaps the students may be off grade level, and you're looking at these campuses here, and you're saying, well, I want them to improve. And the college career readiness, by increasing the dual credit program or the AP program, taking in completion 3 or 4 or 5, how do I design a program to ensure that with these schools? Which one do I pick, the AP or the credit, and how do I design that so our students can be prepared?
But when we design it is we start in elementary and middle schools. It doesn't start at the high school. It starts in the foundational grades. And so that's why we have looked at the curriculum for the elementary level. If you think about our literacy by 3, literacy in the middle, literacy empowered at high school, and the supports that we're putting on our elementary and our middle school campuses, it has to start there. But we also, in this district, offer choice, and our high schools are able to choose which programs they offer, which courses that they offer. And so we need to make sure everything is firm. The foundation for students is firm, and that's firm. The foundation is firm at the elementary and middle school levels, and that's why you have feeder patterns that don't have any IR campuses, because they started in elementary school. But I want to point out even these 4 schools here that we're looking at, 5 schools, they're making the progress. You got to remember, they didn't start where the top group is up here when you think about a Bel Air, Lamar, and West Side. Okay, they started below 20%. So they're making that progress, and we're going to see those percentages to increase, because now we've started not only addressing the root cause at these high schools, but we've addressed the root causes at the elementary and middle school in their academic programs.
These schools that are, and I agree there is progress on these schools, and they just did not meet our district goal, but there is progress, they're on track. The top 3 up there have been the top 3 for a long time. So, that's a given, but what I'm interested is the bottom tiers moving on up, and we're on track. We're going to make sure student outcome, all our students are prepared, but there's a huge gap, I think, or perhaps a challenge in the middle school, and that is when they get to that one of these high schools, they're prepared for that dual credit course or that AP course, and that's the focus and the strategy that I want to hear in terms of what are we doing as a district to ensure that we're going this way and not that way.
That's what I've shared as we look at the academic programming in the elementary and middle schools, that we're firm, and we want to make sure that students are ready, and that also exposing students to the information that they need to select a career pathway as they've transitioned from middle school to high school. And so if you think about our program, Project Explore, that exposes students, and this year we're looking at a pilot in our one or two elementary campuses. So that's what we're starting to do. Like I said, these strategies are working. When we're seeing the gains, like I said, these schools had to start back just a little further behind, but we will get those schools there. We will, because I want to point out, if you look at schools like an Austin or Sterling was a 78, if I'm not mistaken, on their accountability. They were a 78, so they were almost right there at a B, and so they've made progress. As you think about Westbury, the progress that they've made over the past several years, because also we put additional supports. If you think back to Westbury being a former Achieve 180 campus, they've received those additional resources so that those schools would have what they need to prepare their students. So you're also talking about schools that had to catch students up. Then also we needed to, one of the focus or areas of deficit for us was on these campuses not providing the enrichment services that students who were already on grade level needed, because we spent so much time trying to catch up the students who were behind. We didn't offer the rigorous courses that we needed for the students that were already on grade level and meeting their needs.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation, because it is more challenging, and it's not going to progress at a really fast pace if you're a few years behind in terms of a grade level. So I just wanted to continue to focus on growth and continue to focus on moving in a positive direction and not remaining flatline or regressing. So I appreciate that answer. Thank you.
Trustee Dygard.
Thank you. Okay, and I just have to say I love this page and all the reports, because as you can see, I scribble all over it because I'm looking at, which schools were at which place a year ago, who has moved up, but then I was also, cross-referencing that with the page that had with these campuses, with these high schools, to see, who's moving where. Nobody moved down. You have some that stayed the same, but you also have a lot that were really low that moved up. And the one that really, of course, jumps out at me is Kashmir, because they went from below 20% to between 50 and 65%. They jumped over 2 categories. And
Actually, between 35 and 50.
They were down here at the below 20%,
and they're now in the 35 to 50.
Oh, you're right. Sorry, I should put my glasses back on. But regardless, they leapfrogged, right? And so the question that came to my mind with that is, what strategies, are you all digging into what Kashmir has done with regards to this goal, to learn from it, to be applied to the other Achieve 180 schools? Like, what are you looking at with Kashmir? Is it too early? These things just came out, but I got really curious of what are those great things that Kashmir did that are specifically tied to this school that could be beneficial for the other campuses?
So number one, we added the resources that Kashmir has needed for years. I think we keep losing sight of that we didn't start putting all those additional resources in until several years ago. And so that's number one.
Let me clarify. I'm looking at Kashmir, North Forest, Wheatley, Worthing. So all 4 of them together, because they all 4 got Achieve 180 resources, right?
I'm going there. I'm going there. Thank you. So as we look at the resources, but we added Kashmir was a top tier as we think about the additional resources that we added. Also, as it relates to professional development, we stabilized that campus as it relates to principal and teacher leadership over the past several years. North Forest experienced 3 principals in 4 years. Might be a little off there. And so we had to change. Wheatley had several principals, Worthing. And so we're stabilizing those campuses. As it relates to the strategies, those campuses share best practices across. For example, this week, some of Wheatley's staff members were working with Kashmir. Kashmir staff was there. And so we don't just do that with these campuses. They also go to some of their other peers' campuses to see what those campuses are doing. But it also started with the resources first. And then we looked at the academic program. We looked at the needs of the students and what they needed. We looked at making sure they had the right courses, so the right looked at their master schedule. We made sure students were enrolled in the courses they need. Some of our non-negotiable courses are strategic reading and reading and writing, strategic math. So if you're not on grade level, you're going to be enrolled in that course. That's not only at Kashmir, but that's all those campuses where we have students that are struggling as it relates to their reading and math and not being on grade level. So we did look at that, but we added those additional resources.
So, and then when you cross over to the progress measures, if we were to disaggregate, let's say we just looked at those 4 schools, Kashmir, North Forest, Wheatley, Worthing, just for an example, because they were all in the same category, well, I guess they're 2017 graduates. If we were to disaggregate on the growth progress measures and look at those 4 campuses as far as their increase in CTE students completing CTE, students completing APIB, or students completing dual credit, do you think that we would find that Kashmir had increased on those 3 progress measures disproportionately to these other 3 campuses?
I can't give you that response without us digging into the data.
Okay.
Or we would have to look at the data to give you that information.
I would be curious to see that, just to see how predictive those other 3 things, drilling down to just these few schools, how predictive those 3 progress measures were towards this goal.
Yes, we can look at that, because that obviously would have been last year's goal progress measures.
Okay.
Because the data that I'm showing you here for the Achieve 180 campuses are the 18-19
Yes.
data. The goal 2 that you were looking at for those campuses was the graduating class of 2018.
Correct.
So we would need to look at last year's 2017-18 goal progress measures, disaggregate it. We have it by the Achieve 180 office and the Tier 3 campuses as groups, but we don't have them separated out by individual campuses. And we could look at that. That would be something we'd have to go in and
I think it would also serve the purpose of knowing, are the progress measures we've chosen actually as predictive of this goal as we think they are, right? Because if all things are equal, or even not let's say maybe Kashmir didn't increase theirs, but the other 3 did, and yet Kashmir is now leapfrogged, there might be something else to take into consideration. That's just where my brain's going on this one. To your point of these are the 2018 progress measures. Say that again.
These are the 2018-19
Yes.
progress measures.
So
this is grades 10 through 12.
We've met our goal for 2018
the
on the
graduating
goal,
class of 2018,
but
yes.
we're not meeting our goal on the progress measures. Are we concerned that we are not on track then to meet our goal for goal 2?
Let me go back to the goal. So to meet the goal for the 2019 grads, who would be the 2018-19 this last year's, we actually would need to be at 58 or above, which we're already at 60, so assuming we don't go backwards, we would meet our goal. Now, of course, we would want to continue to show increase so that we could get to the 67% that is our 5-year goal for the 2022 grads.
So because we're already ahead, we're going to meet our goal by default in some ways, but that doesn't necessarily
we could potentially. I mean, it's a
growing.
different class, so obviously, a different class's data could be different than how we did in 2018. It could go down. We hope it doesn't. And so from the initial look of how our 2019 grads are doing, we're in hopes that we'll continue to meet our goal. I do want to be clear that the 2018-19 data that we're showing includes 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. So it's not just looking at a graduating class, but it's looking at all of those students, which could impact then the 2019 grads, the 2020 grads, and the 2021 grads.
Okay. So one of the other thoughts I had through this process, especially college readiness is not something that happens in 12th grade, right? It happens throughout high school, but more importantly, it starts even before high school, which I think some of what we're seeing on page 7, what went through my head, and I'm not asking you to provide this data, but, I start wondering, in these campuses where there are more than 65% of the kids meeting the goal, how many of them have pre-K? How many of them are, what is their proportion of EL kids? How many kids started with us versus, were refugees from another country, whatever, that there's still a whole lot packed in here to account for this differentiation, but that we have to make up that ground for our kids, right? So I have a question on, in the other packet, you've got two things here. Percentage of students enrolled in whatever category it is compared to what the percentage who are completing.
Yes.
Is that the percentage of the enrolled kids completing? So, for example, just for, on page 8, so the Achieve 180 feeders, and this is just for example, you've got in spring of 2019, 29.3% were enrolled in an AP or IB class, but in spring of 2019, you have 30.1% completing an AP or IB class. Is that 30.1% of the 29.3?
No, they actually, both of them are over enrollment, but the enrollment is a little better defined when we get to the spring of the completion data versus the enrollment data. So when we do the calculation for you all at the beginning of the semester just to show enrollment, we take any student who has shown up in grades 10 through 12. And then we look at how many are actually enrolled in this case, the AP or IB course. Then for the spring completion data, we actually have a better metric of determining any student who was enrolled based on the first 6 weeks course grade. So it takes out any students out of that denominator who just showed up for one day and then moved out.
But it's higher. But it's higher.
So we actually had a smaller denominator. So we still might have had about the same number of kids who were enrolled, but now your denominator is smaller because we have a better definition of enrollment.
Okay, I see what you're saying now.
So
I understand
if your denominator is smaller,
Got it.
then you're going to have a higher rate.
It totally makes sense now.
Yep.
Okay, thank you
but
for
when we
clarifying that. So I
present
was just trying to figure that out, and thank you for clarifying. That makes sense now. One thing I am curious about is we look at in each of these categories the aggregate district-wide, but then we disaggregate the Achieve 180 schools. So we can compare the Achieve 180 schools to the aggregate, but we're not comparing the Achieve 180 schools to the non-Achieve 180 schools. I would be, in the future, if it's possible to see that, that would be, I think, helpful to see and understand. I know in some of the reports you've disaggregated that for us, and I was looking for that here. Not a big deal, but it's helpful to see. And then in CTE and AP and IB, and this seems to happen every year, why does enrollment drop in the spring? Is it just because of different course offerings? Huh? Students are more apt to drop courses in the spring than in the fall? Okay. Well, but it's 10th, 11th, and 12th.
Right, it's exactly that. It's that certain courses are offered in one particular semester versus another. So for dual credit, for example, they're semester courses. You don't need to be enrolled in the whole thing for the entire year.
Okay, all right. So there's just there are fewer course offerings in the spring, and therefore fewer kids are taking classes. Okay, that makes sense. I just wanted to know what the reason was. So, and then the other thing, in terms of equity, and some of my colleagues have asked questions related to this as well, but what I have continued to notice is the schools with a higher percentage of socioeconomically disadvantaged students have a higher rate of students taking CTE classes, and then it inverses for AP and IB. And I'm curious, what are we doing? I mean, it's great that the overall winds up going up, but what I'd like to eventually see is, the kids in all schools are equally taking, from a percentage standpoint, AP and IB and dual credit. Those things that are predictive of their college success, not just career success. And so, what are y'all?
Sure. And we certainly share that commitment and interest, Trustee Nygaard, where we want to make sure that students at every school, regardless of whatever background they have access to opportunity to access rigorous coursework and succeed in any coursework. I think, to be perfectly honest, I think with things such as CTE, they tend to be more open and inclusive. There can be restrictions, of course, especially if you think of dual credit. You have to be TSI ready to take the academic coursework, and so there are limitations to students' participation. But I think the overall trend, as I mentioned earlier, we're seeing more students who historically have not, student groups that have not taken those courses, but there definitely is work to do, and we certainly want to continue to move forward in that same trajectory and get more access for our students.
So one of the notes that I made, and I know this is 10th through 12th, and I'm not asking you to pull this as a report, but I'm curious if you've looked at, for our high schools, are you seeing an upward trend of, in each individual school, because our 12th graders are going to be gone next year, right? And so what the current freshmen and sophomores are on track to be doing in 11th and 12th grade with regards to dual credit APIB, are you seeing, especially at the ones that are lower down on the list here, are you seeing a tick upwards in the percentage of their students that are freshmen and sophomores on track to be doing dual credit AP and IB as 11th and 10th graders than what you currently have enrolled in those courses in 11th and 12th grade?
It'll of course vary by campus, but if we look at some of the leading indicators, when we look at PSAT data, for example, and we started administering in 8th grade and going to 9th and 10th, we are seeing that positive increase. So we're seeing more students who are on track to meeting college readiness standards, which for us is really exciting. Again, and I think that's reflected in the TSI data that for even this most recent graduating class. We're having more kids graduate college ready, so that is definitely happened. We're also seeing new programs. I mean, when we look at dual enrollment, as Dr. Bryant mentioned earlier, there has been an increase. Some really exciting increases as well. I think it was at Sharpstown, or which was the school that recently saw a huge surge in the number of students who scored on the dual enrollment side. Sharpstown, where dozens of students are now actually graduating with college credit, where they weren't in the past. So we're definitely seeing some pockets of some really great stuff happening. And like I said, we're committed to continuing in that route.
And one of y'all quoted a data point of what's the increase in percentage of our students that are getting a qualifying score in AP?
It's a 5.5% increase in the number of unique students earning a 3, 4, or 5.
Thank you.
And I'll say I think it's the most students we've ever had as a district score those qualifying scores. So again, that trajectory is going up, and we're seeing every year we're hitting the goal.
Would a score of 1 or 2 be predictive of post-secondary readiness just by the nature that they took the class?
So there is a strong correlation between even just taking AP exams and their likelihood of matriculating college and persisting. But of course, as the student performs higher and higher, that correlation is even stronger. So even the way that's defined, many people think of 3, 4, 5 as passing. There technically is not a passing score on AP. 3 is widely considered you're college ready. 2 is possibly college ready. So there are students who are still college ready who are scoring 2. So even seeing kids go from 1 to 2 is a huge gain for us. And of course, we're also seeing, and Carla does a beautiful job in her reports of showing this, you'll see the number of students scoring 4 and 5s have also increased significantly. So even within that group of 3 to 5, we're seeing more kids really score at that really, really high level.
Are you getting more kids taking more AP classes?
So the interesting thing is that's been pretty consistent. It's not the number, it's actually the percentage. So we saw a huge increase over the past few years, and now it's been somewhat flat in terms of the percentage, but then the performance within that group has gone up. So in other words, our kids are doing better as a whole. It's not just that we have more kids taking the exams.
Awesome. And I think that was it. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Trustee Santos.
Thank you, President.
Can I also just interject for 1 second? The AP data that they're referring to is data that we have just received in the district. My department is working on the report that will be coming to the board. So you all will be getting it, hopefully by the end of this month, where we will have data at the district, the campus level, and all of the information. They have the advanced data. So you all will be getting a lot more of a detailed report. It's just not ready yet.
Thank you. I want to take this time right now to apologize to some, not all of my former administrators. As a teacher, we have all these changes every year, and we don't understand exactly why. I know some teachers up here, we were just like workhorses. We stayed in the classroom, only in the classroom, and then we have these policies that come in, and we're like, what the heck, where is this coming from? So to point out to Dr. Lathan and give her thanks, that stabilizing leadership consistency is key. And so to the testing gods and the rule makers out there that change these targets every year, I was telling Dr. Lathan, I can't imagine how difficult all of this is, because she has 284 schools and a team that has to implement all of these changes. And I think it was Dr. Love that said, you're here in September now having to go and focus and meet with principals for this school year for these student outcomes that we have to meet. So I know we love to test kids. The state of Texas loves testing kids, but there's an input that that we have to look at that we don't always take a look at, and that's gauging the effectiveness of professional development. Professional development is needed, and as a teacher, I just always wondered, like, why do they take the most successful professional development away? Like, I loved laying the foundation, NIMSY, like those were amazing, amazing professional developments. So my question is going to be to Dr. Lathan. How are we gauging the effectiveness of professional development? So in order to support our students, we have to have effective PD. And how do we determine what exactly is effective and what's working? Because, I mean, we have these AP scores, these and IB scores that fluctuate, but what are we doing? How are we getting this feedback?
So once we implement a professional development, teachers or participants have an opportunity to respond to a survey, and we look at the data from that survey. Staff members that are also leading, or let's say over that particular department, they're in also observing maybe that presenter or that particular organization. We also, based on school data, when we talk with principals and teachers and say, okay, what worked on this campus? What professional development did you utilize? What strategies? And so we develop our professional development plan around those strategies and also those things that work. Sometimes things don't work, we'll be very honest, and we scrap those. But we look at that, but we've also made a concerted effort. One of the things that we do for professional development is we pre-screen people coming in. Presenters have to get in front of us. And for example, if you're presenting at the principal's meeting, you got to come to cabinet, you have to present, and we will send people back to redo their presentations and to work on that. They're laughing because they know I do. But even our breakout sessions, if it doesn't work, there are times I will go stand beside the chief or the officer, and I'll say, Dr. Barrett, it's not going to happen. They can't come back. Let's get them out. Dr. Davis will tell you that he got an email a couple days ago as we get prepared for Parent University next week. Same thing. Last year when we went to some of the sessions, like, no, they can't present. They can't get in front of parents. They can't get in front of teachers and principals. So we try. Like I said, there are times we still, a few people slip in, but we do try to evaluate and make sure we're putting effective presenters in front of our staff.
Okay, thank you so much. And let's see. I asked because, and I appreciate the survey, but I just never quite understood. I think it was in 2009. We stopped offering professional development for teachers during the day. So before, we used to be able to go off-site, go to a Jane Schaefer, laying the foundations, or it was during the day where we would go and take the school day to go and learn. And those were some of the most amazing professional developments that I had were at the Holocaust Museum or just somewhere that was off-site. And I know that it's not the most cost-effective, but I mean, it was more effective as a teacher to know that I have 8 hours of my work day that I've set aside to learn for my students, as opposed to going on a Saturday or during the summer when I'm like, dang, I have like 30,000 things to do over the summer because I've neglected myself and my health all year long. And so, that was actually one of my next questions. So, so when do trainings take place for teachers, and are they compensated?
So trainings take place at various times. Compensation varies, and the reason I say varies, if it's a mandated training, like for example, during the summer we mandate and say you have to be here, then there's a stipend or the amount attached to that. There are trainings on Saturdays. There are trainings after school hours. Some we have reduced the number of during the school day trainings, and one of the main issues that we encountered was, of course, around substitutes, especially for if you think about our Achieve 180 campuses. And so that was the reason even we developed Achieve 180 now 3 years ago. We looked at the extended Wednesdays, doing it after school, extending that school day, but we do pay teachers a stipend for that. So it varies, but we have good turnout even for Saturday events, summer events. People work it around their schedules.
And so I guess I just want to emphasize that enough. I want to emphasize that it's like, number one, who gets to go to these trainings and who decides who gets to go? And some of the really good trainings, like, teachers miss out on because either a principal doesn't think it's important or they haven't been exposed to it because the principal hasn't been in high school and doesn't know, like, hey, NIMSY is like the most effective, professional development that we have. So what are some college readiness programs that we do use to
So aside from the in-house trainings that were referred to, we ensure that all new AP teachers have an opportunity to attend the AP Summer Institutes at no cost to the campus. The district covers that cost. And similarly with our IB campuses, we as a district work directly with the IB organization to offer that professional development. I agree that NIMSY is an incredible opportunity for advanced placement teachers. The one thing about that is the cost, a very high cost. However, that said, there are 8 campuses that are receiving grants to offer NIMSY, so 8 campuses currently are offering that professional development.
Okay, thank you. And so where are these programs offered? So if they're offered off-site, or are they offered in different states, and how are teachers being compensated to go to these when they do get a chance to go to these?
So the ones that I'm referring to are primarily during the summer, with the exception of NIMSY. And in those situations, compensation varies, but sometimes that's no compensation. Sometimes it's at the discretion of the principal.
Okay. And so I just can't emphasize enough, Dr. Lathan, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to screen these people that are being presented in front of our communities and our teachers and students. But are there any other, like, teacher feedback tools that we're using? Like I said, I don't know why or who, what, when, or why, or how. The laying the foundations. Professional development was let go, but that was the one thing when I first started was an incredible training that was quite, going back to Trustee Dygard's point, APIB Ready doesn't start in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. The laying the foundations, quite literally laid the foundations at 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and it prepared that vertical alignment for our students to be college ready. So yeah, I mean, and also, I think Trustee Sung or Trustee Dygard, was that part of our performance review for the LBB, was the professional development? Like, how did we, that's in there? Okay. Oh, and one more thing, just to go back to Trustee Dygard's point. So schools that aren't offering, let's take Wheatley, for example, that don't have as many opportunities for AP or IB courses, is there any way we can offer a satellite opportunity? So like right now, Northside kids are bused to Barbara Jordan for CTE courses. Is there a possibility for satellite campuses, so Wheatley, Sam Houston can go to the HCC campus near them to get, because again, one more time, Dr. Cruz, to get an English teacher that has a master's degree that is willing to teach dual credit inside of Sam Houston is near impossible. And so that affording that opportunity to students, especially if they're off campus anyway, and saying, yo, you get free college credit. Like, that would be great. So
You're reading our minds. In fact, Dr. Lathan and I have talked extensively about that. This year, in fact, we're with the support of a grant that we received, we're piloting an initiative in which we're hiring AP teachers to kind of float and actually help students at different schools that historically have been underserved, so I believe Kashmir, Wheatley, and other. And we're going to be monitoring the data to see how that works, because we're confident that kind of doing that may actually have a lot of promise and something we could scale to other schools as well. So it's definitely something we're trying.
So instead of busing kids out to college campuses, you would bus teachers in?
Correct.
Okay. If I could recommend and or just suggest, like, a lot of times going off campus and getting onto, a college campus is really cool for kids. Definitely. And they're like, I shouldn't call them kids, young adults. And they really, really appreciate being treated like adults. So I just want to remind y'all, but that's a great idea, so thank you for that. And I think that's pretty much it. Thank you, y'all.
Can I take one moment? Also, I just want to, if I can take the liberty, I want to introduce Ms. Jennifer Erdl, who's actually joined our team as a director. Well, she was on our team, but she's assumed the role of director of post-secondary program. She's phenomenal. She's incredible with educators. She used to work at Chavez, so we're really excited. She's going to be leading a lot of the work with APIB and dual credit.
Thank y'all. And I just want, again, one more time to emphasize, like, the equity piece of this is, like, it's really difficult to get teachers that have their master's degree programs inside of schools that don't have any incentive for teachers to be there. So thank you.
All right, everyone's, I don't really have a question, just more of a comment because, and actually, I think we have Dr. Lita and Ms. Sung that are doing follow-ups, but let me make this, I'm usually like a minute person. Because I know some of us may need to take a body fluid break, and since there's only 5 of us up here, if one leaves, we have to take a pause. So, but really quickly, one of the things that we keep hearing about, and historically, I mean, I've been on and off this board for 15 years, and historically, Bel Air has always been one of those high-performing AP schools, and we're always trying to figure out how to do it, and I'm just wondering, like, why don't we just visit the competition, Bel Air, and when you talk about demographics, Trustee Sung, because I'm really big about that, like, I want to see what it looks like. I mean, and I tell people, just because Bel Air High School is located in Bel Air doesn't mean it's a reflection of the way the community, the homes that are around it is. And when you think about it, I mean, it's 47% economically disadvantaged according to last year's data. 16% Asian Pacific Islanders, 17% African American, 42% Hispanic, 23% white. It's actually I always tell people it's one of our most diverse high schools in all of HISD, and still 47% economically disadvantaged. I won't go into Lamar and West Side because those numbers, I mean, economically disadvantaged numbers just dropped tremendously, so it's not very comparable to the entire district. But I keep thinking that we're missing a great opportunity to go and visit that campus because they've been doing it right for so long. Like I said, I could only go back 15 years. And with 3,000 kids, they've been doing it right for so long. And I also remember the time when we talked about Wheatley High School and not having any AP courses. And I remember being a part of that board that said we're going to start paying for that fee so that we can increase those. And I was part of that board that actually started the dual credit high schools within the district. But it's a shame that we're still talking about not having adequate courses at Wheatley High School 15 years later. I'm going to say less than 15 years because we actually started that discussion maybe 13 years into this. That we're still having that conversation, that we still don't seem to have it right at Wheatley High School and some of these other high schools. And you're right, Trustee Santos, it is hard to get teachers with master's degree to teach college courses, especially because we don't pay that additional $1,000 stipend, right? But the other thing is, well, we did. But the other thing is, having a senior in high school this year, it's been quite a challenge. And here I am, a parent that likes to be pretty involved. And I'm always looking for options. I'm like, okay, if it's not offered on the campus, can he take it online? Because I know you can take those courses online, but I'm a parent who's like has nephews and nieces and knows that you can take these courses online, right? But if I'm one of those parents that don't know because I didn't study in this country, or because I'm just too busy and I just don't have the time to go to those parent night meetings that usually start at 6 o'clock, and I'm still on Metro trying to get home. But one of the things is I've learned by talking to some of my other friends who have kids in high school that we need to do a better job in letting our counselors know that they can share that information with students. Because when I talked to one of my friends, and I said, "Is your daughter taking a dual credit class this year?" She's a senior, and she said, "No." She says, "Can she?" And I said, "Yes, she's a senior." I'm like, why is she going half a day? And she's a cheerleader. She's like got really good grades. And when she went to go out, she says, "Well, we don't have, we have some dual credit courses, but they're full already. So in other words, it's too late." And that's what they told her. And I thought, what? Why can't you just take it online? Why isn't that an option if your daughter's grades are good enough? And I don't know, maybe Dr. Cruz or Dr. Lowe, maybe it's not an option. Is it?
I will say, we've actually met with HC multiple times this week, actually, at high schools. But there are some limitations. HC traditionally doesn't open up slots for high school students because they don't consider it then dual credit. It's just a college course. And then with that, there's fees associated with that. They try to keep the dual credit courses tied to a course offered at the campus with a certain number of students. And that's something they've kind of initiated the last 4 or 5 years, even within the MOU agreement we have with them. So it's become more limiting as far as students independently taking a course, especially if it's more convenient for them. Whereas now, so all the community colleges we work with, they want it to be an embedded course either on the campus or with an identified instructor who teaches just that school's students.
Thank you. Even though a lot of them need some of our students in their schools because their enrollment is going down, or at least in our neighborhood colleges. But I want you to think about this. I want to know what actual certification our students with special need are leaving HISD with. And I don't know if it's a referral. I mean, are they leaving HISD being able to get a certification in culinary, or I keep saying pet grooming even though we don't offer that, but I mean, so many, Pasadena ISD does. But there's some.
But HISD is a B88 average.
but yes, but I want to make sure that we're fulfilling the needs of every child, and I'm talking about our special education students. So we have to make sure that they're leaving here to join the workforce with a career path too, or ready to go to college. And so I want to know what it is that they're leaving us with. If you can provide that, thank you. And then I'm actually going to go to Trustee Sung, and then Trustee Sung, Dr. Lida, and there. Okay, good.
Okay, thank you. I'll also be brief. Just for the record, our comprehensive high schools are all very diverse. Lamar High School is 46% economically disadvantaged. Westside is actually 57% economically disadvantaged, which surprised me when I looked that up. Okay, so just a couple of comments. So one, with regards to our goal, right, and it happens to be up, right, so yay, we exceeded our targets for this year, the 55%. I think that means that we need to go back and reset our targets, right, so we've had to change some of the standards, right, that have made it, that have helped us, right, and then also we just worked really hard this year, right? So we exceeded our target this year. So I think that means that for the next few years, we need to reset different targets. Maybe not change the goal per se, but change what our annual targets are. So that's a conversation that I'd like to flag that I think would make sense for us to have. And then the other thing is, this is long-term work as we keep discussing, right? And Dr. Latham, I've always appreciated your focus on the preparing, going back and making sure our students are prepared at the middle school level for the high school level, and going back even beyond that. So as a board, that means we are going to be looking for long-term progress, right? We know it's not overnight. Next year we're going to come back and suddenly schools that don't have robust APIB programs are suddenly going to have very robust programs. Although maybe, maybe you found the magic bullet. We'll see in a year. But this means that it's really important for the administration, right, Dr. Latham? That means that your plans are really important because you're going to be keeping track of those moves that need to be made on a semester by semester, year by year basis, right? So you referenced the plan that comes before the board each year, the district improvement plan, the school improvement plans. Those are really important. I also want to flag, and thank you for giving us these binders. These are really helpful. Part of our governance framework is that, this is page 19 of the Lone Star Governance Manual, is that the board has provided copies of the superintendent's plan for implementing the board's student outcome goals. And we ensure that the plan includes both implementation, timeline, and measures. And we don't vote to approve those, right? But we need to receive that plan. And it's different from the district
No, we
plan.
interpret that to mean the district improvement plan. So if that's how we interpret that. And we talked about that actually because you mentioned it at the, I think I wanted to say the August agenda review, you had asked about it. And so when we went back to look, that's how we're interpreting that. That is the district improvement
it's a district
plan.
improvement
Yes,
plan.
that we submit annually, or I submit annually to you in November. Because everything, if you think about, that's the overall plan. And if it's something different that you heard different in your training, and they can provide us on a different example, but that's what we are utilizing.
I see. Okay. All right. So my understanding from my training is that it's a different plan because it's focused very specifically on the goals. So that would be a good question to ask our coach when we have one. Okay. Thank you.
Remember, we put our goals into the plan, so the board goals. So
I did notice that. Yes. Thank you. All right. Dr. Lira.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. And I'm glad you brought up Bel Air. I just want to remind my colleagues, I was a faculty member of Bel Air for 10 years. And I was a fly on the wall, and I saw great things, a phenomenal school, even though the demographics change, but the instructional program did not. I was ready to evangelize, but fate has me somewhere else. But nonetheless, there's a lot of great things to learn at Bel Air High School, and it is a sustainable instructional program regardless of the changing demographics. And it's a phenomenal school to go and learn effective strategies and a strong program and phenomenal teachers and leadership. I want to say a couple of things. One, thank you for adding Ms. Erlo to your team. Ms. Erlo and I were colleagues at Chavez High School, and collectively, we turned that school around. So she's a great asset, phenomenal person. And by the way, I want to thank all the speakers for wearing blue today. Blue is in. Thank you, guys.
Okay, no further questions. We are going to take a break, and we'll be back at 7:15. Oh, that's right. Let's vote on this first. Thank you so much, Dr. Latham. We don't want to have to come back to any more questions, right? All right. May I have a motion? Is there a second? Please vote. Motion passes 5-4, 0 against, 0 abstention. Okay, we will now take a 5-minute break. We'll be back at 7:15. The board has now reconvened at 7:21. We are going to go ahead and move into our K2 item, which we do have speakers that have signed up to speak. And if some of you are surprised, legislation changed the laws, and so we will now be having speakers to agenda items moving forward. We had moved them over to agenda review, and we're not taking that away, but you will also have an opportunity to be able to make comments at our board meetings. We just need to set the time restraints in reference to if you speak on agenda review and then you come speak at our board meeting, how much time will be allotted to you. Just so you'll know, I'm letting the public know that the citizens will have an opportunity to be able to come speak at board meetings on agenda items again. And of course, we've always had the hearing the citizen portion. Okay. We will consider speakers to agenda items before taking actions on any business items. Hearing of the community speakers will be heard at the conclusion of the business agenda. Only those who have registered by 9:30 a.m. today may speak this evening. Copies of handouts materials must have been provided to board services by 9:30 a.m. today. So that each person has signed up to speak can be heard by the board, we ask that there be no disruption of the meeting by members of the audience, no abusive statement or actions, no threats of confrontation, no audible expressions by the audience of approval or disapproval. We have 5 speakers registered for one agenda item this evening. Speakers to agenda items shall be limited to 2 minutes each. We also ask that speakers stay on topic and refrain from naming individuals, especially students, as their identity is protected under law. But you may name your own child. We ask that you please speak directly into the microphone. The clock on the wall to your right and on the podium will count down your time and will signal when your time is up. I ask that you please respect our procedures and that of other speakers, and in your remarks promptly when your time has expired. Colleagues, please hold all questions regarding any with this items until we are ready to consider items held for discussion. Our first speaker for K2 approval of a proposed revision to board policy, BGB local, employee rights and privileges, personnel management relations, second reading, is Rita Thomas, followed by Zeph Capo, followed by Andy Dewey, and then Jackie Anderson and Renette Brown. So first, Ms. Rita Thomas. Come on up. Some of y'all know what the procedure is.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're here again asking that y'all support this item. People need a voice in HISD. Their voice has been silent too long. We've been going through some stuff. My people have been going through some stuff since we got the pay raise. Okay. Now we have had our insurance cut for our support personnel. It was not bought through consultation. The insurance had been go through non-instruction or instruction. Did it, Andy? Did the consultation come to y'all?
No, it did not.
They didn't come to neither one of them. And this is a policy. They are breaking their own policies. And so these people need to have a voice, so this kind of stuff won't be going on. We want to bring all the people down here on HISDs so we can be able to get stuff worked out. Now, all these people here, these people are food service managers. They are asking to step down from being a manager and just become a FSA. What that mean? That means a person just gonna come and do the work because they're making the same thing the workers are making. That's a lot of work on them, a lot of stress on them, and they're working for free. And we done told you both, our people's not gonna work no more as a slave for free. So we asking that the school board or the administration, Mr. Busby, whoever, y'all need to come up with something so these people can stay from being a manager. Now, it's gonna be bad. The bus driver get them out of school, ain't nobody there to cook for them. So let's get this fixed. Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on, let's make sure we're ready. Mr. Capo.
Thank you, Madam President. Board members, Madam Superintendent, thank you for this opportunity to speak again. Thank you for the indulgence in trying to work this through. We are rapidly coming up to the October 1st deadline to request an election. An election was going to happen one way or the other. Kind of made sense to be as efficient as possible and know what those rules are going to be because we wouldn't have an opportunity to ask for an election again for another 2 years. So thank you for those pieces. Our members are ready. Our teachers are ready. They've been working for the last year, specializing in areas such as the teacher evaluation system, budgeting, district advisory council, national board certification, areas that they feel are vitally important for their role and their as part of the players when it comes to educating our kids. And if we are able to pass this policy and we are fortuitous enough to be selected as the organization representing our employees, they are ready to take their seats, to move forward, to start having substantive discussions to start using their teacher voice on the policies that matter most to the kids that they teach, the classrooms that they work with, and the schools that they're in. And you know, I think most of you received just the first report, probably the simplest and most straightforward evidence-based research that I could find for you. There are other numerous cases out there as well, too, that this actually matters. It really does help kids read better. It does help them move forward when we can build deep collaboration and increase teacher voice. The Phi Delta Kappa study that just came out, look through that study. One of the main reasons that teachers leave the classroom is because they do not feel like they have enough voice in their work and in the policy place. Passing this policy hopefully will also open up more doors and more avenues for authentic teacher voice to be part of this process. So we ask for your support in this, and thank you very much for this evening.
Mr. Dewey, followed by Ms. Jackie Anderson.
Howdy. Last month I told you about the history of consultation, the proportional system we have, and how it's had some success, but a lot of periods of not having success because of the divisiveness of it with different employee groups in there. Competing, so to speak. Last week I told you a little bit about the history of collaboration in this school district, how we've gone from a top-down system where the principal, superintendent, whoever makes all the decisions, to one where we are now Team HISD, where collaboration is the model that we operate under at the school level. And I asked you, why can't we operate under that model at the district level as well? One voice at the consultation table will give us that collaboration. One of the arguments is, well, you know what, if we only have one employee group doing it, we will cut out all the other groups. Well, you know what? If your job classification does not have a seat at the table today, you've been cut out. Now when we go ahead and elect one voice to speak for all, every single person in this school district will have a voice at the table. So that argument does not hold any water whatsoever. We've been told that the board's supposed to be spending its time on dealing with academics. And what does this have to do with academics? HISD has had a consultation policy for decades. This is nothing new. This is a revision of the consultation policy that will allow the employees and the management to work together, to consult with one another in good faith, so we can solve problems and bring ideas that will improve student learning in this school district. Collaboration, working together, that's what this consultation.
Good evening. I stand before you tonight to speak in support of the proposal to amend the HISD consultation policy so employees may have a single vote at the elected consultation. Best practices would indicate all stakeholders to be at the table in collaboration. Positive student outcomes are a result of successful collaborations and best practices being implemented in the classroom, on the campuses, and throughout the district. I cannot imagine anyone who would not welcome this process, since the primary purpose of the consultation process is to establish, maintain, and facilitate communications with all employees of the district. Everyone should be represented at the table. This process should be meaningful to the employee as well as to the district. It's inspiring to see members of the board come together to overwhelmingly state their belief that all HISD employees should have a voice in the HISD policies and procedures. So again, I would like to thank all of the board members who have voted for the amended consultation policy during past readings. We hope that we have your continued support tonight. Thank you.
Ms. Brown.
Good evening. It's wonderful to be here with you again. I come to bring you part 2 of what I didn't get to say last week. So last week I told you about how I started off as a parent. I sat at the table from 2001 to 2006. So these were some of the things that we were accomplished at the consultation table. 1, parents who were not being paid for working after hours. Ronnie Vaseka made sure that that was taken care of. 2, 1 point the teachers received pay raises, but the parents and other support staff members did not. Once again, we went to consultation and we got it taken care of. 3, there is a public school paraprofessional day that is Texas Government Code 662.049, which is supposed to be observed on the second Wednesday in May. Now, during the era of Dr. Strickland and Dr. Saavedra, they made sure that that happened. And it started in the South with Willie Mae Evans. She made sure that every para in the South District was recognized. And we had a big celebration at Yates High School. 4, with the No Child Left Behind Act, where the parents who were in the classroom had to have their 2 years of college. Well, originally, HISD was saying that we had to have 60 hours. And I was in college at that point, and I did some research. 2 years of college is equal to 48 hours. So we went to consultation. We not only got that changed, but then there were classes that HISD offered so that parents could go and get certified in certain areas, and some of the parents even went on and got their degrees because of what we did. And then parents also, we renamed it from teacher's assistant to teaching assistant, even though I was pushing for a para-educator, but I settled. So I just want to thank Ronnie Vaseka, may he rest in peace, Mr. Thompson, Dr. Strickland, and Dr. Saavedra for making sure that those things happen. And ask not what we do for children, but what would children do? Everybody else.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Capo. All right. We are now ready to move forward on other agenda items for the record. Let it be reflected agenda item attachments to A2, B1, B2, I1, and I2 were revised. Board policy requires trustees to excuse themselves and abstain from all discussion and votes pertaining to contracts that might involve a conflict of interest. As defined in board policy, a conflict of interest is any circumstance that would cast doubt on a trustee's ability to act with total objectivity with regards to the district's interests. Starting with trustees to my far right and continue left, would each trustee state any agenda item that he or she must be held for separate for discussion, and state any agenda items for which a trustee must abstain based on conflict of interest requirements, which also will be held for separate discussion. What did it say in here? Dr. Lita, any abstentions or?
No abstentions, and I don't have anything to hold.
Trustee Sung?
None in K2.
Trustee Santos?
None in B2.
I'm sorry, what was it?
B2?
B1.
I'm sorry, B1. I'm not holding, I don't have any abstentions, and I'm asking to hold B1.
I don't have any abstentions or anything to hold. Trustee Dygard?
B1 and K2.
Okay. All right, thank you. What do we?
Also holding I4. It's later on in your script, but I don't want it to be mistakenly.
Okay. All right. And we're also holding I4. Apparently there's a special motion that has to be read for it. Thank you to board council. We're now ready to consider items held for abstention or discussion by board members, starting with B1, and I will remind my colleagues that we do have a time constraint of limit of 3 minutes total, and board services will be helping us stay on track in reference to that. B1, Trustee Sung, followed by Trustee Dygard.
So for B1, this was postponed from last month because I was hoping we would have a coach to review this. Lisa, do we have a coach now?
We are finalizing signatures tonight, so I would suspect that by the time you have your next meeting, whether it's your meeting next week or your October meeting, you will have a coach in place.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry that we Mike. So I'm sorry we didn't get a coach in place a little earlier. There's still some things on this report that I think are not quite right. It's like that we spent 0 minutes voting last quarter. That seems unlikely to me. But I think that we can, I'm willing to move ahead with this so long as we can go back and revise this if we have changes. So, Lisa, are we able to do that if we bring on a coach and she looks and she says, you know what, this tracker that you approved last quarter is wrong. Can we still go back and change that?
And unfortunately, Trustee Sung, I do not know the answer to that under Lone Star governance, whether those revisions would count or not. So I don't want you to make a vote on the assumption that it would, because I can't, as we sit here today, promise you that it would, because I just don't know the answer.
Well, but we could take a vote, right? Saying, hey, we're approving our next quarter's tracker and we're, making these changes, right? What you're saying is you're not sure whether TA or some other agency would accept those changes.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You done, Trustee Sung? Oh, Trustee Santos?
Thank you, President Davila and Trustee Sung. I'm a little reluctant to be able to vote on this only because we've prolonged the next board contract for so long. And Dr. Lathan, I want to know regarding, these are our board goals and our monitoring system, where are we with our compensation study that we approved in June?
So we needed to go out, Dr. Barajas, the compensation study, I think we're working on an RFP for that.
Just a meeting was scheduled today to discuss the RFP, myself, procurement, certainly HR, to determine what the scope of the report is going to be so we can know what to ask potential bidders, what they're going to come in and do for us.
Okay, so we haven't gotten anywhere on that. All right, what about our enrollment initiative, Dr. Lathan?
The enrollment study, the report will be ready in the end of late fall.
I know, but we allocated money for the additional enrollment initiative back in June.
For a study?
What was it? The initiative.
To add additional funding, I believe it was to support a campus. I think it was to support an elementary campus, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to remember how the information was written, but we've identified the campuses, and so we're starting that process. But we do have that information. I mean, we're working on that, but that was in the amendments, I think, that you made.
Okay, and so my next question was about the next board to help us with B1. Also, this is all tied into B1, our goals. I'd like where we are as far as the LBB and the academic review, and I think we talked a little bit about that earlier in the presentation. The legislative update, because there are policies, for example, like tonight, September 1st, the public is supposed to be able to speak to every agenda item and it not count against our Lone Star governance time. So we were supposed to have a legislative update on policy, so like the blood banks, the SB 11, SB 39, all of those policies. When are we going to have a legislative update? Because if I'm not mistaken, that means that we're behind, because September 1st, we had policies that we had to have in place according to state law. For anybody who wants to take that question.
Trustee Santos, David Thompson and I are ready to go, but the board the board schedules its meetings and determines what's on its agenda, not board council. So whenever the board wants to schedule a legislative update, David Thompson and I will be happy to conduct that if we're your choice to provide that information.
Okay, and I'd also like to know where we are on the policy and procedures manual. All of these ties into our goals, and as a teacher, systems and functions and procedures are the most important thing in your classroom to keep it running and to make it efficient. So when we don't have our policy and procedures manual, it makes it really hard to be efficient. So I'd like to, President Davila, so an update on the compensation study, like if we can get that as a weekly report, the enrollment initiative, the LBB performance academic review, our coach, legislative update, and the policies and procedures manual, like if we can, I guess I'm directing that to you.
I don't work here, remember? So you're asking me to do work that I don't have access to. Like, I don't know when the LBB is going to be completed because I don't engage with the company that does that. And so the only thing I can actually do that's on your to-do list is schedule the legislative agenda, and if I'm correct, Lisa just updated me, we finally have next board contract ready to sign, not because the board didn't follow procedures, but because additional information was being requested by administration. So once we have signed contract, we are ready to go with everything else when it has to do with Lone Star governance and policy and procedures moving forward. So I can take those two on.
Okay, thank you. So I guess then I'm submitting this as a referral to whomever it may concern, the compensation study, the enrollment initiative, the LBB. If we can have that as an actual Outlook invite, the legislative update, those are President Davila's to-do list, and the policies and procedure manual, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, just to clarify, as it relates to the RFP, they're not weekly updates. So as Dr. Barajas has stated, they're working on putting together the scope of work. Then the RFP will go out as it relates to the compensation study. LBB will give us, they tell us when the final report will be ready. We've already discussed that you and Trustee Dygart want to be invited to the next verification review, and so you will receive a calendar invite as it relates to that.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, are we done? With no further questions in reference to this item, we're ready to vote.
President, I'd like to move to postpone this into the next meeting so we can talk it out with our next board coach.
So are you making a motion to postpone into our next meeting?
Or is it the next hearings? For the hearing.
September 19th?
Yes.
Is our hearing date.
Yes.
Second. There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, please vote. Motion carries 5-4, 0 against. On to the next item that has been held for discussion. It's just K2. You know what? Let me go into order here. Let me go on to I4 so that we can go ahead. I4 has its approval of resolution adopting tax rate and levying of ad valorem taxes for tax year 2019. And Lisa, what am I supposed to read? Apparently there's... All right, so the motion is different. Huh. All right, so here's the motion for I4. I move that the Board of Education adopt a property tax rate of $1.1367 per each $100, and further move that the Board of Education approve the resolution and ordinance adopting the tax rate and levy ad valorem taxes for the year 2019 as reflected in the resolution. Do I have a second? Is there any discussion? It's actually good news because it actually lowers taxes. But people can't chime in to talk because we have the...
Let's see somebody already started voting.
Oh, well, I know. So can we... I can't get to the discussion part, and so I need you to, there's this, thank you. Trustee Santos.
I would just like a legislative update on this to better understand this.
That's going to come with the rest of the legislative update.
Lisa, is this time sensitive?
The adoption of your tax rate is time sensitive. Now, the changes that were made as part of SB2 and House Bill 3, they affect what a district is referring to as a rollback rate. It's now called the voter tax approval rate. You're not hitting that rate in this resolution, and then the effective tax rate is now called the no new revenue rate. Those are the only two significant changes with respect to the adoption of your tax rate that are a result of SB2. I'm sorry, SB2 and House Bill 3. There are some other changes that affect financial matters, like what we used to call a tax ratification election, bond elections, and information that you have to provide to voters that, of course, we will update the board on. But I don't recall off the top of my head there being significant changes to the adoption of the tax rate, with the exception of the change in the definition of those two terms that I explained, meaning your rollback rate is now called your voter approval rate, and your effective tax rate is now called your no new revenue rate.
Okay, thank you.
And Renee, if I misspoke there, I can't see you, but please correct me if I did.
Okay, thank you. Okay, no further discussion. Now we can vote. To the debate. Motion carries 5-4, 0 abstention.
We are here at a historically
Ms. Taylor-Jones but we can't see her, so technically she doesn't count. But we can hear her and she can hear us, but for some reason we can't get a video, and I think it must be because of everything else going on at the convention, at the debate.
So when I was there, the way we handled
I don't know if we can mute her. We can disconnect her because she's not online, and she hasn't been able to get online for a while. And it might be because of all the other people tweeting and doing social media at the debate.
That's how they were all handled as proper state. I know.
There, okay. All right, thank you, whoever did that. Our next agenda item that was held is K2. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Yeah, it's just, for some reason, it's just. I know Trustee Dygard is trying to, let's see, mine doesn't work either. No, mine's not working either. To request to talk? The button is not working? Is it not? Oh, now it is. Okay. So Trustee Dygard followed by Trustee Sung. Oops,
I move to postpone this until the meeting next Thursday.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
I need to get home to a sick kid.
That means we have to.
You will lose a quorum if I leave.
There is no second to the motion, so. All right. I appreciate the trustees that showed up. Thank you. I appreciate the trustees that did show up, but she is correct. We don't have a quorum, so our meeting.
What about the hearing of citizens?
Oh, she has her closed session ones. You're right. closed session.
She sure did. And that's not right.
Yeah.
Write that in the TA report. What about the hearing of citizens?
That we can't do hearing the citizens either.
Are y'all serious?
Oh, I'm here. And I committed to being here, and I'm still here. And I appreciate those who showed up today. That's all I got to say. But I can't force people to come or force people to stay. All right, meeting is adjourned at 7:52.